Captain Ethan Drayden was not sure how he ended up on the alien ship. One moment, he had been exploring a strange, remote planet on the edge of the galaxy, and the next, he found himself being pulled into the air by a powerful force. Before he knew it, he was aboard a ship unlike any he had ever seen, smooth, metallic, and glowing faintly with an unfamiliar energy. He wasn't the only one confused. The alien crew members were equally curious about the human who had suddenly appeared in their midst. But despite their advanced technology, the aliens weren't prepared for a human like Ethan. After a quick check by their medical systems, the ship's captain had ordered him to the infirmary, where he would be treated for any injuries or illnesses. The nurse waiting for him, there was a being named Tylis. She was tall, her skin shimmering with a light purple hue, and her eyes were a soft amber that seemed to shimmer in the dim light of the medical bay. She had been working in the medical field for many years, but had never treated a human before. To her, humans were fascinating creatures, different from anything she had ever studied. "Captain Drayden," Tylis said, her voice calm yet full of curiosity. "Please take a seat. I will examine you now." Ethan, feeling a bit nervous but trying to remain calm, nodded and sat on the examination table. The alien nurse was gentle and professional, yet there was an air of wonder in her movements. She ran her fingers over strange instruments that hummed and clicked, scanning his body in ways that seemed almost magical. Ethan had never seen anything like this before. "So, where am I?" Ethan asked, looking around at the unfamiliar surroundings. "You are aboard the Veritian ship," Tylis replied, her eyes flicking to the data on her screen. "We found you on the surface of an unknown planet. You appear to be in good health, but we will perform a full examination to ensure there are no hidden issues." Ethan blinked. "The Veritians? You mean you're not from Earth?" Tylis shook her head. "No, our species is far from Earth. We are explorers, much like you, but our technology is more advanced. We have traveled across many galaxies." Ethan tried to relax, realizing that he was in the hands of professionals. He trusted that he would be all right. However, it was clear that the nurse was just as curious about him as he was about her and her kind. As she continued her work, Tylis asked Ethan questions about Earth, about his home, his technology, and his culture. Ethan was more than happy to share. "Tell me," Tylis said, turning to face him, "how do humans heal from injuries or illnesses? What kind of medical technology do you have?" Ethan chuckled. "We have some advanced technology, but it's not as advanced as what you have. We rely on machines, yes, but we also use a lot of basic techniques. We have hospitals, doctors, and medicines. Things you might find primitive compared to your methods." Tylis's eyes sparkled with interest. "Primitive? I doubt that," she said, smiling. "But tell me, what kind of tools do you use in your medical practices?" Ethan reached into his pocket and pulled out a small device. A simple stethoscope. It was nothing special by human standards, but to Tylis, it seemed like an extraordinary object. She tilted her head curiously. "What is this?" she asked. "This," Ethan explained, "is a stethoscope. We use it to listen to someone's heartbeat, to check if their heart is working properly." Tylis took the stethoscope gently from his hands, holding it like it was a rare artifact. She had never seen anything like it before. In her culture, their technology allowed them to scan the body at a molecular level, so the idea of using a simple tool to listen to sounds inside the body was fascinating to her. "This is so different from our methods," Tylis said thoughtfully, "but I can see how it might be effective." Ethan smiled, realizing how much they could learn from each other. Despite the differences in their worlds, they both shared a common interest in understanding and healing. The conversation soon shifted from medical tools to cultural topics. Ethan told her about Earth's history, its struggles, its triumphs, and the various cultures that made up humanity. Tylis, in turn, spoke of the Veritians' peaceful ways, their love of exploration, and their dedication to preserving life in all its forms. As the examination continued, Tylus became even more fascinated by Ethan. There was something about him, a determination, a resilience, that she found both admirable and humbling. His species had faced countless challenges on their homeworld, and yet they had survived and thrived. Tylus wondered what other secrets Ethan's people might hold. Ethan, for his part, was equally intrigued by Tylus. Despite the vast differences in their appearances and technologies, they both seemed to have the same goal: to understand the universe and make the world, or in this case, the galaxy, a better place. As the examination drew to a close, Tylus gave him a reassuring smile. "You're healthy, Captain Drayton. But I do hope you'll stay here a while longer. There's much we can learn from each other." Ethan nodded, feeling a sense of peace he hadn't felt in a long time. Perhaps this unexpected encounter wasn't as bad as he first thought. In fact, it might just be the start of something incredible. The examination room aboard the Varisian ship was quiet, except for the soft hum of various machines and the occasional beep from the medical scanners. Ethan sat on the examination table, feeling a bit out of place but strangely calm. Tylus, the alien nurse, moved gracefully around him, gathering tools and preparing for the next phase of his checkup. Despite her calm demeanor, Ethan could tell she was just as curious about him as he was about her. Tylus was a skilled healer, and her species had advanced medical technology that could scan the body at a level far beyond anything humans had. Ethan had never been in a place like this before, surrounded by such advanced equipment. He couldn't help but feel a sense of awe as he watched her work. She held a small device in her hand that seemed to shimmer with light, and as she pointed it toward his chest, it began to scan him. Ethan couldn't see what the device was doing, but he could feel it. There was a faint, tingling sensation as it passed over his body. It was different from anything he had ever experienced before. "Fascinating," Tylus murmured to herself as she watched the data appear on her screen. "Your physiology is unlike anything we've encountered before." Ethan smiled, trying to hide his nervousness. "I get that a lot. You must see a lot of different species, huh?" Tylus glanced at him, her amber eyes curious. "Yes, we do. But humans are unique. Your biology is complex, yet resilient. It's impressive." Ethan felt a surge of pride. Despite being stranded on an alien ship, he was beginning to feel like he wasn't completely out of place. There was something reassuring about Tylus's words, even though he didn't fully understand them. As the examination continued, Tylus worked carefully, taking measurements and collecting data on Ethan's body. She seemed so focused on her task, but Ethan couldn't help but notice how she occasionally looked at him with a mix of fascination and respect. It wasn't the same look he had seen from some of the other aliens. They had been curious about him, yes, but Tylus seemed to genuinely care about his well-being. "Your heart rate is stable," Tylus said as she checked a small monitor beside him. "But your body temperature is slightly higher than usual. Are you feeling unwell?" Ethan thought for a moment. "No, not really. I've felt fine since I woke up. I guess I'm just a little on edge, being in an alien place and all." Tylus nodded. "Understandable. It's not easy adjusting to a new environment, especially one so different from your own." She reached for another device, this one more complex and with several glowing buttons. It was something Ethan hadn't seen before, but Tylus seemed to know exactly how to use it. She gently placed it against his forehead, and Ethan felt a warm pulse as it scanned his brain activity. "Your neural patterns are normal," Tylus said, studying the data carefully. "But there's something unusual about your cognitive processes. It's as if your brain is wired differently." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" Tylus paused, looking at him thoughtfully. "Your mental responses are faster than most species I've encountered, and your ability to adapt to new situations is remarkable." Ethan couldn't help but grin. "Well, that's just the human spirit, I guess. We don't give up easily." Tylus smiled back, clearly impressed by his words. "I can see that." As the examination continued, Tylus asked him more questions about Earth, about how humans lived, and how they dealt with diseases and injuries. She was fascinated by the ways humans had learned to overcome so many challenges despite their limited technology. The more she learned, the more she began to respect humanity's resilience. Ethan, for his part, was equally intrigued by her questions. She didn't seem to see humans as inferior or primitive, as some other aliens might have. Instead, she was interested in their potential and what they could achieve. It was refreshing, and Ethan found himself wanting to share more with her. Finally, after what seemed like hours, Tylus stepped back, satisfied with the results of the examination. Everything appears normal, Captain Drayton. There's no sign of illness or injury. Ethan let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. That's good to hear. I've been through a lot, but I'm glad to know I'm not in bad shape. Tylus gave him a soft smile. You're very healthy, considering the circumstances. I've treated many species, but humans are unique. Ethan chuckled. I guess that's a compliment. Tylus nodded, still looking at him with curiosity in her eyes. You've survived things that most species couldn't. Your people are impressive. Ethan felt a warmth spread through him at her words. Thanks, I appreciate that. But honestly, we've got a long way to go. We're still learning a lot about the universe. I think that's what makes you interesting, Tylus said, her voice soft but full of meaning. You're always learning, always growing. And that makes you different from the others. Ethan looked at her, a smile tugging at his lips. Well, if you ever need a lesson in human perseverance, I'm your guy. Tylus laughed softly, and for a moment, the tension in the room seemed to melt away. They were no longer just an alien nurse and a human captain. They were two beings, curious about each other's worlds and cultures. I look forward to learning more about your species, Captain Drayton, Tylus said, her smile genuine. You've already shown me that there's more to you than meets the eye. Ethan nodded, feeling a sense of connection to her that he hadn't expected. Maybe this strange situation wasn't so bad after all. Maybe, just maybe, there was something more to be gained from it than just survival. The days passed quickly aboard the Veritian ship. Ethan had been given a guest quarters, a small but comfortable room filled with soft, glowing lights and strange but beautiful designs. It wasn't much, but it was enough for him to rest and think. His mind often wandered back to his strange encounter with Tylus, the alien nurse. She was unlike anyone he had ever met. Every day, she would check on him, making sure he was adjusting well to the new environment. Each visit was more than just a medical examination. It became a chance to learn more about each other's worlds. Tylus had an endless supply of questions about Earth, its cultures and humanity's history, and Ethan found himself equally fascinated by her stories of the Veritian people, their long history of exploration, and their deep respect for life in all its forms. One afternoon, as the ship glided silently through space, Tylus came to visit Ethan in his quarters. She was holding a small device, the same one she had used during his medical examination. Captain Drayton, she said, her voice as calm as always, I've been studying your species further. I think I understand your biology better now, but there's still so much to learn. Ethan smiled, standing up from his chair. I'm all ears. I'm still getting used to the idea of an alien species actually wanting to learn about us. Tylus smiled back, her amber eyes sparkling with curiosity. Of course, you are unique. I believe there is much we can gain from each other. Perhaps we can exchange knowledge that would benefit both of our species. Ethan raised an eyebrow. That sounds like a pretty big idea. What do you have in mind? Tylus motioned for him to follow her. Come with me. I want to show you something. They walked down the smooth corridors of the Veritian ship, which seemed to shift and pulse with the ship's movements, almost alive in its own way. Ethan couldn't help but marvel at the technology. It was nothing like anything on Earth. The walls were translucent in places, revealing vast, open spaces and intricate machinery. They eventually arrived at a large room, unlike any Ethan had seen before. The room was filled with glowing holograms and displays of galaxies, planets, and stars. In the center was a large, circular table with a shimmering blue light hovering over it. "This is our data room," Tylus explained. "Here, we collect and analyze information from across the galaxy. We've gathered knowledge from many worlds, and we share it with our people. But we also want to learn more from Earth." Ethan looked around in awe. "This is incredible. It's like your entire species' knowledge is right here." Tylus nodded. "It is. And now, I'd like to share a bit of our knowledge with you. You're a captain, yes. You understand the importance of exploration and gathering information." Ethan couldn't hide his excitement. "Yeah, I do. But I have to admit, I didn't expect to be doing this kind of thing. Learning from an alien species so soon." Tylus smiled at his enthusiasm. "It's never too late to learn. Let me show you something." She placed her hand over the blue light, and a new hologram appeared in front of them. It was a map of the galaxy, with thousands of stars and planets glowing softly. The image zoomed in, showing a cluster of stars that Ethan didn't recognize. "This is a sector of space that we have explored," Tylus said. "We call it the Veil Nebula. It's a beautiful place, but it's also home to a mysterious force. We've been trying to understand it for years." Ethan leaned in closer, intrigued. "What kind of force?" "We don't know yet," Tylus admitted. "Some of our ships have gone in to study it, but they've never returned. It's as if the nebula is pulling them in, trapping them somehow." Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. "That sounds dangerous." "It is," Tylus agreed. "But we're explorers. We don't shy away from danger. We want to understand what's out there." Ethan looked at the map again, his mind racing with possibilities. "Have you tried sending probes or anything like that?" "We have," Tylus said, "but the nebula interferes with our technology. We've had no success in gathering data. That's why we're looking for new solutions. Perhaps something your species can offer." Ethan's mind began to work. "Well, Earth might not have the technology to fully study the nebula, but we've developed some interesting techniques for surviving in dangerous environments. If you need help, I think I could convince some of my people to assist." Tylus watched him carefully, a glimmer of hope in her eyes. "Do you truly believe your people would help us?" Ethan nodded confidently. "Humans are resilient. If we see something that needs fixing, we'll do our best to help, no matter the odds. We've done it before." Tylus smiled, her gaze softening. "Perhaps that's why I admire your species so much. You never give up." Ethan felt a sense of pride swell in his chest. "Well, I can tell you this. If you're looking for help, you've got the right person standing here." They stood there for a moment, the two of them looking at the holographic map, connected by a shared sense of determination. Tylus felt a growing respect for Ethan and humanity, while Ethan was beginning to realize that his time in the galaxy was shaping up to be something much greater than just a simple exploration mission. The possibility of working together, of sharing knowledge and resources, felt like the beginning of something exciting, a new chapter in the story of both their peoples. As days passed aboard the Veritian ship, Ethan found himself growing more and more accustomed to the alien environment. He spent time exploring the ship's various levels, fascinated by the advanced technology and the peaceful, harmonious way the Veritians seemed to live. There were no visible weapons, no signs of conflict, just a calm focus on knowledge and exploration. Tylus continued to visit him daily, and their conversations had become even more engaging. They exchanged stories about their respective worlds, laughed about the differences in their cultures, and shared thoughts on what the future might hold. But as much as Ethan enjoyed these talks, there was one thing that still weighed heavily on his mind: the mysterious Veil Nebula. Tylus had been right about one thing. It was a force that neither her people nor anyone else seemed to fully understand. Despite their best efforts, they had no answers, only questions. But Ethan couldn't help but feel drawn to it. The more he learned about it, the more he wanted to be a part of the effort to uncover its secrets. He had no idea how Earth could help, but he had a gut feeling that it might be the key to something big. One afternoon, as the ship sailed through the quiet void of space, Ethan found himself standing at the observation window, staring out at the endless stars. Tylus approached him quietly, her soft footsteps barely audible on the ship's smooth floor. "Thinking about the Veil Nebula again?" she asked, her voice gentle. Ethan turned to face her, nodding. "Yeah, I can't help it. It's like there's something out there calling me. Something important." Tylus gave a small smile. "I understand. It's a mystery that has captivated many of us. But even though we don't have all the answers, we continue to search. The unknown is a part of our nature." Ethan glanced back at the stars. "I guess that's what makes explorers who they are, always looking for the next big thing, no matter how risky it might seem." Tylus's eyes sparkled as she moved to stand beside him. "Exactly. But sometimes the greatest discoveries come from working together. Maybe this time, it's not just about one species figuring it out alone." Ethan raised an eyebrow, intrigued by her words. "You mean Earth and Varetians working together?" Tylus nodded. "Yes. If your people are as resourceful as you say, perhaps you have the means to help us unlock the mystery. Your perspective might offer insights that we've overlooked." Ethan felt a sudden surge of excitement. He had been thinking the same thing but hadn't put it into words yet. If Earth could provide any unique knowledge or tools that would help in the effort to explore the Veil Nebula, it could be a monumental step forward. It could even bring their two worlds closer together in ways neither of them had imagined. "Let's talk to your leaders," Ethan suggested. "If they're open to the idea, maybe we can share some Earth technology that might work in your environment. It might be a good starting point." Tylus's expression softened with gratitude. "I'll arrange a meeting. We'll see if we can convince the council to consider your offer. But I can't promise it will be easy. Some of our leaders are hesitant about working too closely with other species." Ethan gave her a reassuring smile. "I get it. But if they could see how much is at stake, they might change their minds. The Veil Nebula isn't just a mystery. If it's something that can be explored, it could change everything, for both of us." Tylus nodded, her amber eyes fixed on Ethan. "Perhaps you are right. The key to unlocking the nebula's secrets might be in the collaboration between our worlds. Your technology, combined with our knowledge, could be the answer." The two of them stood in silence for a moment, gazing out at the stars. The vastness of space seemed to stretch on forever, filled with untapped possibilities. Ethan felt a sense of purpose rising within him. This wasn't just a journey to the unknown. This was the beginning of something bigger, something that could change the course of history for both Earth and the Varetians. Later that evening, Tylus took Ethan to a grand hall where the Varetian council had gathered. The room was filled with soft light, and the walls displayed holographic images of distant stars and planets. The atmosphere was peaceful, but Ethan could sense the weight of the discussions taking place. As they entered, Tylus addressed the council, explaining Ethan's proposal and the potential for collaboration between their two species. The council members listened carefully, some nodding in agreement, while others remained skeptical. Ethan stepped forward, his voice steady but filled with passion. "I know it's a big decision, but we have a chance here, a chance to discover something that could change everything. We're both explorers. We both want answers. And together, we can achieve something neither of us could do alone." There was a long pause. Then one of the council members spoke. "You are bold, human, but your words are filled with conviction. Perhaps it is time for us to take a leap of faith." Tylus gave Ethan a supportive smile. The meeting had just begun, and the path ahead was uncertain, but Ethan knew one thing for sure. He was ready to face whatever came next. With Tylus and the Varetian people by his side, they might just be able to uncover the secrets of the Veil Nebula. The council meeting had ended on a note of cautious optimism. The Varetian leaders weren't entirely convinced yet, but Ethan could sense that they were intrigued by the idea of collaboration. Tylus had worked hard to present the proposal, and Ethan felt a quiet hope stirring within him. The journey to explore the Veil Nebula was not going to be easy, but it was a journey they were now willing to take together. Over the following days, Ethan found himself preparing for the next phase of their plan. Tylus was busy working behind the scenes, gathering the necessary resources and liaising with the Varisian scientists who would be involved in the project. The ship itself was being outfitted with new technology that could assist in the exploration of the nebula, but much of the focus was on what Earth could offer. Ethan was surprised by the seriousness with which the Varisians approached the venture. They weren't just looking for basic assistance. They were interested in learning as much as they could from humanity. It was a humbling experience for Ethan, who had once thought of Earth as a small and insignificant place in the vastness of space. Now he realized that his world had something to offer that the Varisians valued. One morning, Tylus approached Ethan with a map of the Veil Nebula and a collection of data about its strange properties. "We've gathered more information from our probes," she said, her voice steady. "But we still don't know what we're dealing with. The nebula's energy patterns are unlike anything we've encountered." Ethan studied the holographic display in front of him, his brow furrowing as he tried to make sense of the data. "It's like there's something inside the nebula, but it's hard to pinpoint, almost like it's alive." Tylus nodded. "That's the most disturbing part. The energy signatures we've recorded don't match any natural phenomena. And yet, it doesn't seem to be destructive. It's as though the nebula is trying to communicate, but we can't understand its language." Ethan felt a sense of unease in the pit of his stomach. The idea of something in space that could communicate, but in a way that was beyond their understanding, was both fascinating and frightening. What if we're approaching it all wrong? What if we need to think outside the box? Tylus gave him a curious look. "What do you mean?" "I don't know," Ethan said slowly. "Maybe the nebula isn't something to be studied in the way we usually study things. Maybe it's not about technology or data. Maybe it's about feeling, understanding it with our instincts, not just our minds." Tylus appeared deep in thought, considering his words. "That's an interesting idea. We've always relied on logic and reason to make sense of the unknown, but perhaps your suggestion holds merit. We may need to look at the nebula in a different way." Ethan smiled, feeling a sense of accomplishment in knowing that his thoughts were being taken seriously. He hadn't expected to be the one offering advice to a species as advanced as the Varisians, but there was something about the way they worked that made him feel valued. Later that day, Ethan was introduced to the lead Varisian scientist who would be working with him on the project. Her name was Zira, and she had a calm demeanor that immediately put Ethan at ease. She was tall and graceful, with a silvery sheen to her skin that shimmered in the light. Her eyes, a deep shade of violet, were focused and sharp. "Ethan, I've heard a great deal about you," Zira said, extending her hand in greeting. "Tylus speaks highly of your insights." "Thank you," Ethan replied, shaking her hand. "I'm just trying to contribute in any way I can." Zira nodded. "Your perspective could prove invaluable. We have access to vast amounts of data, but understanding the essence of what we're dealing with is still beyond us. Perhaps you can help us bridge that gap." As the days went by, Ethan and Zira worked together, analyzing the data from the Varisian probes and trying to come up with new ways to study the nebula. They experimented with different techniques, running simulations and testing theories, but every step seemed to lead them into more questions. Despite the challenges, there was a sense of camaraderie between the two. Zira was eager to learn from Ethan's experiences and ideas, and Ethan found her to be an excellent collaborator. Together, they made small breakthroughs, discovering new patterns in the nebula's energy field that no one had noticed before. It was a slow process, but Ethan was encouraged. For the first time, he felt that humanity was contributing something meaningful to the universe. One evening, as the ship drifted through the cold emptiness of space, Ethan stood at the observation window again, staring out at the stars. Tylus joined him, her presence a comforting one. "You look deep in thought," she said softly. Ethan shrugged. I guess I'm just trying to wrap my mind around everything. We're on the verge of something huge, and I can't shake the feeling that it's going to change everything." Tylus smiled warmly. "It will, Ethan. No matter the outcome, this journey is already something remarkable. You've brought us closer to understanding the unknown. I think we're all beginning to realize that." Ethan looked over at her, his heart swelling with gratitude. The journey was far from over, but he had no doubt that the path they were on was the right one. Together, humans and Veritians would continue to explore the mystery of the Veil Nebula. And maybe, just maybe, they would unlock a secret that would forever alter the course of both their worlds. The days had turned into weeks, and the team had made significant progress in their study of the Veil Nebula. Tylus, Zira, and the other scientists were becoming more and more impressed with Ethan's insights. His natural curiosity and fresh perspective were helping them see things they had missed before. Yet the mystery of the nebula still loomed large over them. Ethan couldn't help but feel a growing sense of excitement every time they made a new discovery. Each piece of data felt like a clue to a puzzle, and though they hadn't yet unlocked the nebula's secrets, they were getting closer. But there were still challenges to face. One morning, the team gathered in the research room aboard the Veritian ship. A large holographic display was set up, showing a three-dimensional map of the nebula. The intricate patterns of light and energy swirled around, shifting and pulsing in strange, rhythmic waves. The image was mesmerizing, but also unnerving. "This is where we are," Tylus said, pointing to a small section of the map that represented their current position within the nebula. "But what we don't understand is the way the nebula's energy fluctuates. It doesn't just stay constant. It changes, almost like it's alive." Ethan studied the hologram, trying to make sense of the shifting patterns. "It's like it has its own heartbeat," he said, his voice filled with wonder. "I think you're right. It's not just an energy field. It could be something organic." Zira, standing next to him, nodded thoughtfully. "We've considered that possibility. Some of our studies have shown that the energy signatures resemble those of biological organisms, but they are too complex to identify. The data we've gathered is unlike anything we've seen before." Ethan felt a thrill of excitement. What if this nebula is more than just a cloud of gas and dust? What if it's something alive, or at least something that's trying to communicate with us? The others looked at him, intrigued by his suggestion. Tylus folded her arms and leaned against the table. "You're saying the nebula could have a consciousness?" "It's possible," Ethan said, his voice growing more confident. "It's not unheard of for complex forms of life to exist in ways we don't fully understand. Maybe the nebula itself is a form of life, something with a mind of its own, something that's been around far longer than we could imagine." Zira, always the scientist, was skeptical but fascinated. "It's a bold theory, but we have no proof. Our equipment can't detect any physical life forms. We can only measure energy." Tylus smiled at the challenge. "Then we need to find another way to study it. We can't just rely on data. We need to experience it, interact with it on a deeper level." Ethan's heart raced. He had an idea, one that seemed impossible but worth trying. What if we could somehow send a probe into the heart of the nebula? Something that can adapt to the shifting energies and maybe make contact with whatever intelligence might be there. Zira raised an eyebrow. "That's a bold idea. But how would you even build such a probe?" "I don't know exactly," Ethan admitted, feeling the weight of the challenge. "But I know that we have to try something different. We can't just observe from the outside and expect to understand it." The team fell silent, each of them lost in their thoughts. Then, slowly, Tylus spoke up. "We'll have to think outside the box, like you said. We've never attempted anything like this before, but it could be the key. If the nebula really is alive, or even if it's just a highly intelligent system, we need to find a way to communicate with it." Ethan nodded, feeling the weight of their mission. It wasn't just about discovery anymore. It was about survival. If they didn't understand the nebula's true nature, they might never be able to leave it. Over the next few days, the team worked tirelessly to design a probe that could withstand the extreme conditions of the nebula. Ethan spent long hours in the lab, poring over blueprints, discussing ideas with Zira, and testing different materials. The challenge was immense, but the thought of being the first to communicate with a sentient nebula drove him forward. Tylis was there every step of the way, offering her expertise and encouraging the team when morale began to dip. "We're on the verge of something great," she reminded them. "We've faced challenges before, and we've always found a way through." One evening, as Ethan was leaving the lab, Tylis caught up with him. "How are you holding up?" she asked, her voice soft. Ethan smiled, though he was tired. "I'm fine, just a little worn out, but I think we're onto something big." "I think so too," Tylis said, her eyes sparkling with determination. "You've given us hope, Ethan. I don't think we would have come this far without your perspective." Ethan was taken aback by her words. It was the first time anyone had really acknowledged the difference he was making. He had come here to help, to contribute, but hearing Tylis say that made it all feel more meaningful. "We'll get there," he said, his voice full of quiet resolve. "Together." As he walked to his quarters that evening, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to change. They were standing on the edge of a new frontier, and no matter the risks, he knew they had to keep moving forward. The answers they sought were out there, waiting to be discovered in the uncharted depths of the Veil Nebula. The atmosphere in the research room was tense with excitement. The team had spent weeks preparing the probe, making sure it could survive the dangerous environment of the Veil Nebula. Ethan couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. They were on the verge of doing something no one else had ever attempted. If this worked, they would not just be studying the nebula. They would be reaching out to something beyond their understanding. The small ship, which had been modified to carry the probe, hovered just outside the nebula's edge. It was designed to be sturdy and flexible, capable of adapting to the intense fluctuations in the nebula's energy fields. Ethan stood in front of the large control panel, his fingers hovering over the buttons. "This is it," Tylis said, her voice steady but filled with awe. "The probe is ready. We've prepared as much as we can. Now we see what's really out there." Ethan nodded. He couldn't hide the nerves building inside him. Despite the team's hard work, no one knew what the outcome would be. The probe was their best hope for making contact with the nebula, but it could easily fail. The energy patterns they had been studying had grown even more erratic, and no one could predict how the nebula might react to their intrusion. With a deep breath, Ethan pressed the button. The small craft hummed to life, and a holographic display showed the probe detaching from the ship. It glided forward, disappearing into the swirling colors and lights of the nebula. The screen flickered for a moment before stabilizing. "I'm transmitting a real-time feed," Zira said, her voice calm. "We'll be able to monitor the probe's progress as it enters the core of the nebula." The image on the screen showed the probe's view. Bright flashes of light, like lightning, pulsed around it, but the probe seemed to glide through the energy storm without any major issues. Ethan watched, fascinated by the way the nebula seemed to move around the probe, almost as though it were alive. "This is incredible," Ethan whispered. But then, without warning, the probe's transmission began to glitch. The image wavered, and the colors on the screen seemed to shift rapidly. Ethan's heart raced as he tried to make sense of what was happening. The energy fields were becoming more chaotic. "Tylis, what's going on?" Ethan asked, his voice tense. Tylis was already at the controls, her eyes scanning the data. "The nebula is reacting. We might have triggered something. The probe is facing resistance from the core." The screen suddenly went black. The room fell silent as everyone stared at the blank display. A few moments later, the feed returned, but this time the image was different. The probe was surrounded by a soft glow, like a protective barrier. It was still within the nebula, but the energy fluctuations seemed to have calmed. "Is it working?" Ethan asked, unsure. "It looks like it," Zira replied, her voice filled with surprise. The nebula isn't attacking the probe. It's responding. This could be a breakthrough. The team watched as the probe continued to move deeper into the nebula, the glow around it slowly expanding. There was no sign of danger, only a gentle, swirling dance of energy. It felt as if the nebula was alive, moving in rhythm with the probe, almost in sync with it. "We're getting something," Tylus said suddenly. "There's a new signal, very faint, but it's definitely there. It's not like any energy signature we've seen before. It's almost like a pattern, like it's trying to communicate." Ethan's heart skipped a beat. Could this be it? Could they be the first to make contact with an intelligent force beyond their comprehension? "Can we translate it?" he asked. Zira's fingers flew over the console, working to analyze the data. "It's hard to say. The signal's complex, but there's something familiar about it, almost like it's a language." Tylus leaned forward, her eyes wide with excitement. "This could be it, Ethan. The nebula isn't just a phenomenon. It's a form of intelligence. We might be able to communicate with it." Ethan stood still, trying to process what was happening. The idea that they were actually speaking with a living, sentient nebula was both thrilling and terrifying. What if the nebula was far older and wiser than they could ever understand? What if it held knowledge beyond their wildest dreams? "We need to proceed carefully," Tylus cautioned. "We don't know what the nebula wants. We can't make any sudden moves. Let's continue to analyze the signal and see if we can form a connection." The team spent the next few hours carefully studying the pattern in the signal. Slowly, they began to piece together parts of the strange language. It was unlike anything they had ever encountered, but it was definitely a form of communication. "We've got something," Zira said, her voice filled with wonder. "It's not just random energy fluctuations. This is a message." Ethan could hardly believe it. The moment he had been hoping for had arrived. They weren't just studying the nebula. They were speaking to it. For the first time in history, humanity had made contact with an intelligence that existed in the stars themselves. "This is only the beginning," Tylus said softly. "We've unlocked the first step toward understanding this nebula. Who knows what else it has to share?" Ethan looked out at the swirling mass of energy on the screen, feeling a deep sense of awe. They had taken the first step, and he knew that this discovery would change everything. The universe was full of mysteries, and now they had made contact with one of them. What lay ahead was unknown, but it was something worth exploring.